Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. With me, of course, is Mike Tagliere. You can find us on Twitter at DanHarris80 and at Mike Tagliere NFL. Is that your Twitter profile tags? I legitimately have said that 4 times a week for the last 11 weeks. That's your Twitter profile,
I don't
right?
even know what you said. I don't even listen to you anymore.
Mike Tagliere NFL? Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
All right, great. I totally know this. This is fine. This is hosting 101 to not remember your basically best friend / co-host's Twitter profile after 11 weeks. Hi, Tags. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm over the hangover that was week 10. We're on to week 11, and it's going to be a good show.
On to week 11. Well, I'm very excited. It's our Start Sit show. I'm very excited to welcome in today's guest. It's Ryan Noonan over from FTN Network. You can find him on Twitter at Rye, that's R-Y, Noonan on Twitter. How you doing, Ryan?
I'm good, Dan. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk shop with you guys.
Ryan is also one up. We don't know. I don't know if they've come out yet with this week's results, but heading in, you were one of, if not the most accurate better against the spread. Is that right?
Checks out. Yeah. It's been a good start. It's a long. We got a few more weeks, so can't take the crown yet. I know Tags himself is in the mix here, but good group, and man, week 10 was a bloodbath. So I'm excited to move on and turn the page here to week 11.
Yeah. It was terrible. It was really bad. I didn't have a good feel, which you feel like we would at this point, given that, we were kind of flying blind for the first 4 weeks of the season with no preseason. But anyway, we can talk about betting on another podcast. Here, it's fantasy, and it starts at day, so you know what we do. We're going to talk about some guys that we don't like, some guys that we do like, some super deep sleepers, and then we will preview tomorrow's game between the Seahawks and the Cardinals. But first, let me remind you that we are giving away the signed Alvin Kamara helmet. You can enter the contest that runs through the end of November, so you got a couple more weeks here. One of 3 ways. One, you can follow us on Twitter at FantasyPros, follow us on Instagram at FantasyPros, or subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/FantasyPros. Then head over to FantasyPros.com/contest to actually enter. Again, that's going to run through November. Signed Alvin Kamara helmet, so you got nothing to lose. Go ahead and enter. All right, let's get into it today, guys. But first, let's hit up some news that we've seen so far earlier today. Christian McCaffrey, if I have this correctly, was officially ruled out and then officially not ruled out, but is not expected to play. I think the Panthers might have tweeted out that he's out and then corrected that tweet later on. I think that's right. So as far as I know, guys, you can correct me if I'm wrong. He's not actually ruled out yet as we sit here on Wednesday, but he's unlikely to play. Is that right?
That's correct. He was never going to play.
He's not going to play. So, obviously, you're going to be starting Mike Davis. Kenny Golladay returned to practice, so we'll check on his status as we go along. Drew Brees' second opinion confirmed the first one, which was a lot of fractured ribs and a collapsed lung. Right now, he's going to miss at least 2 weeks, and then they'll reevaluate. Joe Mixon, still day to day. We'll see about practice. Last I heard, he was not seen on the rehab field. Let me ask you guys something, because I don't know. At this point, we expected Joe Mixon to not even miss a game. I think this might be week 5, considering the bye that he could miss. If he's out, how do you feel again about Gio Bernard against Washington if Mixon has to miss this game? Let's go to you, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like Samaje Perine continues to just kind of work in on Gio, especially on passing down. So, we saw that early in the season where Gio not only had like the Mixon role, he maintained his pass catching role. So he had like Mixon, 1.2, and now we're just kind of slowly seeing a little bit less and less of that. So not super excited about the prospects of him moving forward, but again, volume at this stage of the game, if you're getting someone that's getting 65-70% of the snaps and touches, still probably a viable RB2 most weeks.
How about you, Tags?
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same range here. Giovanni Bernard, it was weird to see the timeshare last week. I don't know if it had anything to do with the fact that game was a blowout pretty early on. But, the matchup where Giovanni Bernard shines the most is in the passing game. And DeAndre Swift was the first running back to total more than 3 receptions and 30 yards against Washington. So it's a little ding into his value, but I do anticipate that game being relatively close throughout. So I would guess that, Bernard's going to get 14, 15 plus touches in that game. So he's an RB2 this week.
If Mixon is out, would you rather start Gio Bernard, Tags, or Duke Johnson against the Pats? Half PPR.
I will go with Duke Johnson just because we know he's getting like 90% of the touches, whereas Bernard seemed. Again, I think it was game script, but there's always that additional risk that Travion Williams or Samaje Perine is going to steal some of that work. And again, Washington, it's not a pushover matchup, so I'd actually go with Duke Johnson.
How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, same. I mean, Tags may be right around the game script thing, but heading into the bye when they won at home against the Titans, Pirine saw, I think, his highest snap and touch rate of the season too. So it just could be where they're lightening the load on Gio, and he's just not really explosive in his opportunities. So could be something that sticks.
All right, let's get into the starts at Denver today. Everybody knows about our expert consensus rankings. We'll say ECR for short. That's where experts around the industry submit their rankings. So you get a consensus of the aggregate of what it all is. So we're going to talk about some borderline guys here. We're going to talk about some guys outside the guaranteed starts, some guys that are, guaranteed starts, but who we're fading a little bit, all of that stuff. So let's start with running backs here. And let's start with running backs who are outside the top 20 in our expert consensus rankings, who you're looking to start this week. Let's start with you, Ryan.
I mean, you said borderline. There cannot be a more borderline running back historically than Kalen Ballage. I think he's kind of right on this ECR cusp here, and just kind of is really indicative of the Chargers backfield in general this year. It's just been absolutely a mess. And now we hear the coach speak today, coming out with Anthony Lynn saying KB's our guy moving forward. It's going to be the lead guy. We want to give him a shot. Joshua Kelly just really in the doghouse. Tremaine Pope came back last week, really didn't do much of anything. He popped a couple weeks ago against the Broncos, and that was strange. But we have a Week 11 2020 Kalen Ballage viable week in fantasy here. 46 snaps last week, just 17 for Kelly. Pope didn't get on the field. 23 touches. He was involved in the passing game too. So Kalen Ballage, I think now it's early in the week. Maybe some experts haven't got in their rankings. He'll definitely be comfortably inside the top 20. And I think I have him so far inside the top 10, which is just kind of wild to say out loud on a recorded podcast.
Yeah, it's very 2020, as we've talked about. And yeah, Anthony Lynn came out and was like, yeah, we got to give him more work. And it's deserved because he looks good. I don't know how it is. And I get that where you all joke about, look, you get away from Adam Gase. Look what happens. But legitimately, guys, we've seen Kalen Ballage have passes thrown at him and he ducks out of the way. That's not Adam Gase. So it's very strange to me. Tags, how do you feel about Ballage? I mean, you've got to have him basically, around your top 20, right? At worst.
Yeah, he's in the RB2 conversation this week for sure. We should be expecting another 15 plus touches out of him. The matchup against the Jets is not as great as everybody thinks it is on the ground, but at the same time, running backs have averaged 29.2 touches per game against them, and Joshua Kelly ain't it. And they've realized that. Tremaine Pope was active last week, but didn't get a single touch. So, I mean, it seems like Ballage is their guy moving forward. So when you get a running back, again, it really doesn't even matter the offense that they're playing in. If you get a running back that's getting 15 plus touches, he's almost automatically in the RB2 range. You have to be wildly inefficient to fall outside of that range. And Ballage has been actually pretty dang good. So I don't want to ding him too much for the matchup because it's not great, but the volume should help make up for that. So, I have Ballage in RB2 territory.
So it's a start-sit show, but I do want to get your opinion because I know that some leagues still have their trade deadlines, that haven't passed yet, so they're thinking about it. Eckler, he's not going to play this week. I feel pretty confident he's not going to play next week. My guess is that he'll be back, let's say, in week 13. Do you guys think, I'll start with you, Ryan, that Ballage is somebody who can carve out a role even when Eckler gets back, so much so that if people are thinking about trading for him, they don't need to just think about filling 1 week, but he is somebody who could have viability even long-term, even when Eckler gets back? I
mean, it's so deep there, though. We've seen historically that they've liked to split time with Eckler. He's just been one of those uber efficient, Alvin Kamara-like guys where he's really just doing it on 15 touches, most of it coming through the passing game. So they have liked to supplement him with maybe more of your traditional inside the tackles kind of a runner. It looks like Ballage has the clearest path moving forward to being that guy with Kelly out and Jackson out and Tremaine Pope not really doing much of anything. So I think there's some viability to him moving forward to the rest of the year, though I'm sure he succeeds most of the really interesting touches. I mean, right now, 5-6 targets is really nice. I mean, I think he loses those to Eckler moving forward.
Yeah. And he hasn't ducked out of the way of any of them, as far as I can tell. So he's growing as a player, at this stage in his career. Tags, what about you? And then we'll move on to start sit for your pick here. But do you think that Ballage is somebody who is basically going to be a guy that fantasy managers can get away with starting maybe as a flex play even after Eckler gets back?
Yeah, I kind of do actually, because this backfield has averaged over 30 touches per game, and Eckler is not, again, Ryan mentioned it, he's not a guy that's going to rack up 20 touches per week or anything like that. So they've always involved another guy. Justin Jackson's always seemingly hurt, and that's probably the reason why he doesn't play a whole lot. And then Joshua Kelly has been a complete letdown. So why wouldn't it be Ballage? So especially with the way he's played. So I do believe that he's going to have some viability. I mean, once we get through bye weeks, our running back rankings aren't going to look so dire because again, you have 4 teams on bye every single week. It's just like that makes things a lot. It just makes people look better than they actually are in terms of like where we rank them. But I think he will have flex viability in most weeks.
I agree with that. I do think that if you're looking for him, like, first of all, you can trade for somebody who's only going to help you for a week or two. And it's one of my biggest bugaboos with fantasy managers that people don't like to do that. You have to win weeks, especially right now if you're trying to get into the playoffs. It's okay if you're going to trade for somebody who doesn't have long-term viability. But I agree. I think Ballage does because they're not going to just roll out Eckler in a 25-touch roll or anything like that. So we have a who should I start tool that I like to look at so you can see who people are putting in when they're considering starting. So with Ballage, let me ask you, Ryan, would you rather start Ballage this week or Damian Harris against Houston?
I'm going with Ballage, which is wild. I mean, Harris is basically not involved in passing game work, and Cam is really the lead, goal line guy. I think only Zeke has more carries inside the 5 than Cam does in the season. So it's a great matchup for Harris. But again, since he has, he's kind of an airball in the passing game, I'd have to give the edge to Ballage.
How about you, Tags?
Between Ballage and who?
And Damian Harris against Houston.
I have Damian Harris slightly higher. If you play in a full PPR format, I might lean towards Ballage, but it's close.
How about Duke Johnson, who we mentioned before? Ballage or Duke Johnson, Ryan?
Ballage for me there as well.
How about you, Tags?
I have Duke Johnson higher.
Yeah, they're all right there. And again, that's why, it's the who should I start. That's at, by the way, fantasypros.com/start. If you want to do that, you can put in 2 players. You can put them up to 4 players at each position and compare and see who you should start. But those are the 2 that are being talked about the most, and they're right in the same range. So I have no problem going either way. Right now I have them within 3 spots between the 3 of them anyway. So any way you want to go, but I do have Duke Johnson slightly higher with then Damian Harris, and then right behind him is Ballage. All right, let's get to you, Tags. Who's somebody outside of the top 20 who you're looking to start this week?
Let's go with Salvon Ahmed. He looked fantastic last week. They bumped up his carries. Now going against a Broncos team that the Broncos were really, really, really good against the run early in the year. In terms of like weighted opportunity, they were one of the best defenses out there. And then it's like I started looking at it and it was like the Broncos for the first 6 weeks, they hadn't allowed a backfield more than 116 rushing yards in a game. Now, all of a sudden, that's changed. 193 yards, 4 touchdowns on 37 carries to the Raiders last week. And then you go with the Chargers just a couple weeks prior, 188 yards and 34 carries. And you say, what the heck happened? Mike Purcell, their best nose tackle, he went down with a season-ending injury 3 weeks ago, and that's when these struggles started. They had already lost Jarrell Casey earlier in the year, so clearly they're missing a lot of talent on the defensive line. The Dolphins are favorites in this game, so even if Matt Breida comes back, I can't imagine they're going to give him more than 7 to 10 touches, basically what they've been doing all year, especially when Ahmed has looked fantastic. And I was worried about his passing game role, but he actually ran the most routes among the running backs last week too. It's just they didn't throw the ball a whole lot, and that's what they're doing with Tua under center. They're keeping the ball. I think he's only averaged 25, 26 pass attempts in his 3 games. So Ahmed should have 15-plus touches in this game against the Denver Broncos defense that is struggling on the defensive line.
Yeah, I'm glad Ahmed has moved up the rankings because when I checked earlier, because he was the guy on my list as well, he was 27th, and I figured he'd move up a little bit as more experts got their rankings, and he's now 21st, which is basically around where I had him, so I felt good about that too. How do you feel about Ahmed this week, Ryan?
Yeah, he was the other guy I had written down here. Great spot. Tags laid it out nicely. I mean, like to see him running a route on nearly 60% of the team dropbacks as well. Tags mentioned too, volume's been a problem here. They just haven't had that many plays. But again, like if Breida is active, I feel like he's a change of pace guy. It looks like, they finally released Jordan Howard. We don't have to worry about, game day inactive or whether or not he's in there to vulture, the valuable goal line carry. So yeah, it looks like a guy that has a real shot to lead the team in touches again.
So I didn't list this one in the Who Should I Start tool because I thought I would be, but Tags was talking about Ahmed. So would you rather start Tags, Ahmed, or Kalen Ballage?
I have them right next to each other, 21 and 22. They were the two guys I had listed for this segment, so I like them both.
Yeah, that's that's been searched for the most times in our Who Should I Start tool. How about you, Ryan? Who do you like more there?
Yeah, I'm apparently way out over my skis on Kalen Ballage this week, which is something I might need to double check.
There's no place better to be than all in on Kalen Ballage.
Yeah,
Trust
no
me,
kidding.
you're good.
But I like the game environment there more. I do think that both games are both backs are viable this week, and I think it's a real decision. So it makes sense that people are searching. It's kind of where we're at, where these Duke Johnsons, Kalen Ballage, Salvon Ahmed, guys that really have not been, in the team picture of late, all of a sudden are very viable in Week 11.
Tags, how about Ahmed or Ronald Jones against the Rams?
Ahmed, for sure.
Okay. Oh, that's an easy one for you then.
It is. I have Ronald Jones at 24. Not a big fan of him. Like I'd be like pressed, and I'm curious what your guys' opinion is. Todd Gurley or Ahmed or Ballage?
Yeah, that was close for me. Right now, I have it Gurley at 19, Ballage at 21, and Ahmed at 23. But that's in a range where if it flipped by the time we get to rankings lock, I wouldn't be surprised, right? Because that's where it is. But right now, I do have Gurley slightly ahead. I know it's against the Saints. Gurley a little bit ahead, Ballage. But, after talking to Ryan, how can I not basically just inch Ballage up my rank? He's so in on him. But I have Todd Gurley a little bit higher. How about you? I assume Ballage is your highest, Ryan.
Yeah, we're stealing the segment later for sure, but Gurley is a tough one this week. I have Ahmed one spot ahead of him.
Okay, so Ahmed was my guy. I'll throw a little love at J.D. McKissic's way, who I believe is 27th in ECR. I have him 24th. So he's there. I don't necessarily know if we're going to see 15 targets every single week, like, essentially we've done the last 2 weeks. But if you get targets against the Bengals, you do produce. And if instead of finding some sort of viable second wide receiver, like maybe it's going to be Logan Thomas, maybe instead it's McKissic, who's going to continue to get all these targets, I think he's got a good chance of producing. So in a half PPR league in particular, certainly in a full PPR league, he's a guy who I'm willing to start as closer to a borderline RB2. But Ahmed really was the guy who I think is too low here in ECR. Let's get to wide receivers. Let's look at somebody who is outside the top 30, Ryan. Who are you looking to start there?
This is another one I think we'll start to see some steam on as we get closer to lock here. Jakobi Meyers has really emerged for New England with Julian Edelman going down. Leads all receivers in weighted opportunity over the past 4 weeks. It's 37 targets in that time frame, which is just wild usage. And Houston has struggled all year, 25th in passing success rate allowed. I think it's a great spot for Jakobi here.
Yeah, what do you think about that, Tags? How are you feeling on Jakobi this week?
I like it. I worry about the fact that there's not going to be a whole lot of passing on that side of the ball, just because, Cam Newton, not very good. Bradley Roby, he missed the game against the Jaguars because apparently it wasn't even an injury. It was a behavior. And
disciplinary,
they basically just benched him. So he's back in the lineup, and there's really only one wide receiver that you really would even contemplate covering with Roby and like have him shadow him around the field. I definitely don't mind him as a wide receiver 3 this week, but New England really should just run the ball all over Houston. That's a team that runs the ball more than any other team in the league. Houston allows more rushing production than any other team in the league. It's kind of like a marriage that just says they're going to run all over them. So I just don't know how many targets Myers has. Like the Patriots only targeted their wide receiver 7 times last week. Myers got all of them, which is kind of ridiculous, but only 7 times. That's the part I worry about.
Well, he basically throws as many passing touchdowns as Cam Newton anyway. So Myers or Jerry Jeudy against Miami? Let me ask you, Ryan.
I have Myers at 29 and Jeudy at 32. So pretty close. I mean, Miami on the outside is obviously, probably 2 of the best cover corners in the league. So that hurts Jeudy a little bit. Mostly just Drew Lock. I mean, he's just been pretty awful. They've been really the worst offense in the league, which is pretty surprising when you consider how bad some of the other offenses are in football. I mean, they're 32nd in offensive DVOA. They are 30th in both yards and points per drive in the season. So, the Denver offense just as a whole is really hard to back anywhere at this point.
And it may not even be Lock this weekend. I mean, depending on how. I mean, he's practicing, I guess, a little bit on the side, but seems crazy to me if they let him out there. How about you, Tags? Would you rather start Myers or Jeudy?
Myers.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's around the range that I'm in, but I would lean with Myers too. All right, Tags, who's your guy outside the top 30?
Well, I have two of them that I was really torn on, so I almost want you to go to see if you steal my guy.
I will. I'll go with one. Now, my guy is now just outside the top 30. He was 35th when I checked this morning. Again, as more experts get in, it moves a little bit. But it's Mike Williams. I know he's a little boom or bust, of course, but this is against the Jets. And if you want to say that they have a decent corner, it would be Poole, who plays the slot. I believe they cut Pierre Desir, if I read that right. Austin, if they want to throw and they want to feature Mike Williams, they're going to be able to do it without any issues whatsoever. So he's a guy who I have, I'm willing to start as a wide receiver 3. Now that he's 31, I'm not that far much higher than him on consensus. But look, Kalen Ballage and Mike Williams, anybody on the Chargers really, I feel fine about starting. So I'm good with him there. Again, when I first checked, he was 35th. So, when I had him at 29th, that was a little higher than consensus. I still am higher than consensus, but not quite as much. What do you think, Ryan, about Mike Williams this weekend?
Yeah, I was pretty bullish on him coming into the season just because he gets the targets we want. He gets the deep A-dot targets and he gets the red zone looks. So, in especially non-PPR leagues, the touchdown equity for Williams is pretty strong. And again, you mentioned the secondary issues for the Jets are something we want to attack every week. So I think he's very much in play.
All right, Tags, go ahead with you can have two then. I assume I didn't steal your guy, so go ahead.
You didn't. They're both. I have both these guys in the top 24. So I feel like I'm a little out on a limb here, but I love Jamison Crowder and Marvin Jones. Jamison Crowder, I know he didn't have a whole lot of targets against the Patriots when they played in Week 9 before their bye, but he was also very, very questionable throughout the week, and sometimes I attribute that to the team not knowing if they're going to have that player in the lineup, and they just don't build a game plan around him. But this week against the Chargers, if there's a weak spot in that defense, it's over the middle of the field. They traded away their slot cornerback. Why am I forgetting? Desmond King. They traded him away at the trade deadline, so that's led to them starting Tevon Campbell. He's a last year's undrafted free agent rookie. He has not done well in that spot. He's allowed 9 of 11 passing for 92 yards and 2 touchdowns in his coverage. Even Jakeem Grant last week walked into production playing the slot, 4 catches, 43 yards and a touchdown. So I expect Jamison Crowder to walk back into a big role. Week 9 was the first time he didn't see 10 targets in a start. So he should be healthy coming off that bye. The hamstring should be fine. Flacco's played. He looked competent. So I like Jamison Crowder quite a bit as like a high-end wide receiver 3, maybe even a low-end wide receiver 2. And then Marvin Jones. How do we not like Marvin Jones with Kenny Golladay seeming like he's not going to play again? Danny Amendola is someone that he was hurt in the game last week with his hip. So I don't know where they're going to throw the ball. Marvin Jones should be stack up the targets. And if you look at Carolina, they've been better than average against wide receivers, but there have been 6 wide receivers who have gotten 10 plus targets. Every single one of those wide receivers finished with at least 19.7 PPR points. So if Marvin Jones is going to get the volume, which he really, really should, I love him this week.
Okay, couple of things. First, I don't know whether or not he's expected to play, but Kenny Golladay did return to practice today. So, of course, this is a Kenny Golladay is out ranking for you,
correct.
Right? Okay,
yep.
Very good. If Golladay plays, I assume you don't really want a piece of Marvin Jones, or would you
I would lower him down for sure because those guaranteed targets are no longer there. He would probably be in the 5-6 target range, and I don't feel great about him then. He would probably be like a wide receiver 4 at that point.
Yeah. All right. So Crowder, I am actually in complete agreement on, and he should have been my guy. My bad on this. He's 35th in ECR. I have him 28th. Where do you say you have him, Tags?
I have him up at 22 right now.
Okay. All right. That's high. All right. Ryan, how do you feel about Jamison Crowder this week?
I guess I'm going against the crowd a little bit. He was really the bell of the ball early in the season, right? They had no one else. There was no Brashad Perryman, no Denzel Mims, and that was also mostly with Sam Darnold. And we've seen a little bit more. There's more opportunities, more bodies there. Whether you think that they're good or not is a different discussion, I guess. But they're at least there. We've just seen Flacco more willing to take shots deep down the field. The Chargers have actually been decent against the pass at times. 6th lowest completion rate allowed. They've only allowed 2 receivers on the season to top 100 yards. And we've seen Crowder do that this season. It's mostly after the catch type stuff, or those 15 target volume games. So I think he's probably should be a little higher than he is in the consensus, but I'm not necessarily bullish on him this week.
I will say that Brashad Perriman does have some sort of shoulder injury that cropped up today on the injury report, and he was limited in practice. So It's Jets, but if he does have to miss the game, of course, that makes Crowder, more enticing tags. That's high for you. So I'm going to give you some names here and ask you how you feel. Would you rather start Jamison Crowder or the actual number 22 in the expert consensus rankings, Justin Jefferson?
I don't. Are you looking at standard?
Am I looking at standard? No, I am looking at standard.
I was going to say, I was like, it looks off than mine.
Yep.
But Justin Jefferson is a 20, and
yeah.
I would play Justin Jefferson over Jamison Crowder.
Okay. That is my bad. My bad. Rookie mistake. This is the first show I've ever hosted. Chris Godwin against the Rams tags or James Crowder?
Crowder.
DJ Chark against Pittsburgh or Crowder?
I can't trust Luton to get the ball down the field against that Pittsburgh pass rush. That's the concern I have there. The matchup is not terrible for Chark, but I'll still take. So I'll take Crowder.
How about T. Higgins or Crowder?
Higgins. Higgins is a stud.
Okay, yeah. So Jamison Crowder obviously was 31. That's why he wasn't on my list of looking at it. Mike Williams is still 35. My bad on everything. I'm the worst host ever. Okay. So, all right, that's fine. And let me ask you, Ryan, about Marvin Jones. Assuming that Galladay is out right now, how do you feel about Jones this weekend against Carolina?
Yeah, tags outlined a great. I mean, it's obviously contingent on the Galladay stuff, but those targets have to go somewhere. They don't know if Hawkinson is 100% or not, dealing with that toe injury. And, it's got to go to Jones. We've seen this over time. Like, he spikes, and he has these just massive stretches of just, 3-4 touchdowns. And, if he's going to handle 7+ targets in a game like this, in a nice matchup, decent total, pretty good scoring environment, I think Jones is definitely going to be a top 30 play if Galladay sits.
All right, let's go now to quarterbacks. Let's talk outside the top 12 here in expert consensus ranking. Ryan, who are you liking this week?
Joe Burrow is just a guy that is a volume beast. No matter what, we talked about kind of the issues with the run game. Washington's actually been pretty stout against the pass, but again, Burrow makes up for it on volume. We've kind of seen, unfortunately, the retirement/death of AJ Green, along with the emergence of T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd is just kind of rock solid there too. And really, the secondary receivers, the guys that barely even play. I mean, Auden Tate's and the other Mike Thomas come in and make plays. There's just so much volume. They lead the league in neutral passing game situation. They dominated the league last week, and it obviously was lots of positive game script there for them. But there's just so much volume with Burrow. He is been a little bit of a disappointment in the touchdown rate, but again, we want to lean on the passing volume, and Burrow is in a great spot this week.
Tags Burrow is 15th in the rankings. Where do you have him?
It's right where I have him, actually.
Right.
I actually like him as like a sleeper in DFS this week. Nobody's going to play him. Like Washington, in terms of like points per game, the total's low in that game. There's a lot of reasons why it's like that, and I understand it. But teams have only thrown the ball 52.8% of the time against them. The Bengals throw the ball 63% of the time. They don't have a very good run game right now. Even if Mixon plays, they don't have a good run game. This team is built around passing. And if you look at the matchups that Washington has had, they've actually allowed top 8 performances to Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Jared Goff, and Matthew Stafford, where the quarterbacks that they completely shut down were Carson Wentz, bad, Baker Mayfield, been bad, Daniel Jones twice, and then Andy Dalton. I mean, the matchups were so Burrow. I would say that he belongs in the better portion of the quarterbacks that they're playing. So I kind of like Burrow too. I mean, he's not the one I'm going to pick for this, but I like him.
Well, who should I start? The most searched for is actually Burrow or Cam Newton. How do you feel about that one, Ryan?
Well, that's an interesting one. I'd probably go Cam. Again, just he's the workhorse. He's the goal line back. He's just getting. You're not going to expect much through the air. The only problem is that there's just so little play volume in that game as a whole. I mean, I think the Texans games are averaging the fewest plays in the league. We know the Pats want to grind it out too. That would be a tough one for me. I think just because Cam has so much rushing equity, I think I'd probably lean him, but it's close.
How about you, Tags?
I have Cam slightly there just because his floor should be there. Again, this is a team that runs the ball a ton. Houston allows so much production on the ground, and it's to running backs, granted, but Cam Newton is basically a running back getting 10 carries per game with a lot of the goal line work. But yeah, the Texans allow, I just pulled it up, in terms of total plays per game, they rank as the 8th defense, and then the Patriots, the fewest games in the league, or fewest plays per game in the league, total-wise. So yes, that should be a relatively low volume game, and that's the concern for everybody involved. Everybody. Like, Damian Harris, Rex Burkhead, Cam Newton, all those guys. So that definitely is a concern.
All right, Tags. Who's your guy who you're starting? I bet we have the same guy, but I just want to know. Go ahead.
Jameis.
Yep.
That your guy?
Yes, that's my guy. But you still have to talk about it. That doesn't get you out of just saying his name.
I want you to talk about him.
No, you talk. I'll give you an alternate guy when you're done with Jameis.
Because if Jameis totally screws us, I'm going to blame you.
Fine.
Fine. But 8 of 9 quarterbacks that have played against the Falcons this year have posted at least 18 fantasy points against them. They're allowing the 6th fewest fantasy points on the ground. Everybody looks at this matchup against the Falcons and they think, oh, this team just bleeds fantasy points. And they do. They've allowed the 2nd most fantasy points per game, like overall as a team. Quarterbacks are scoring on average 6.7 more fantasy points than they do against non-Falcons opponents. So it's just like it keeps creeping up. The only game that they actually looked pretty good was the game against Teddy Bridgewater, which was the 2nd game they played against him in a divisional matchup, and it was also in sloppy conditions on that Thursday night game. So 68% completion rate, 8.3 yards per attempt, 6.3% touchdown rate. I mean, there's no other team in the league that has allowed more fantasy points through the air than the Falcons, including the Seahawks.
So where do you actually have him ranked, Tags?
I have him up at 10.
Okay. How about you, Ryan? How do you feel about Winston this week?
It's hard not to like him. I mean, he there's just so much potential we saw there last year, obviously, and it's a great matchup. I mean, over at 4 for 4, if a really cool schedule-adjusted fantasy points allowed metric, and Atlanta's allowing the most to quarterbacks in the season. The problem is that we all know from watching way too many primetime Saints games over the years is that for some reason Taysom Hill is always involved. Again, very limited from a drop back standpoint. Like I don't think he's going to be taking passing game work per se from Jameis, but just as far as like fantasy points scored, I think that Taysom we know will be involved around the goal line, and sometimes it just hurts his ceiling. So that's kind of why I'm pretty much in line with the ECR ranking there too. But I totally get why you guys like him. It's a great spot.
Tags Cam Newton or Jameis Winston?
I have Jameis higher.
Okay, I think that's legitimately the only person in the start sit. How about Winston or Tannehill?
Winston. I have Tannehill at 16, I think.
Yeah, legitimately, I think in our Who Should I Start tool, every single quarterback versus Jameis Winston has been searched for because, this is where people are. And I think the way I look at it is, of course, there are question marks with Jameis Winston and how we're going to see it regardless of the matchup. But there are question marks with everybody when you're in this range. Like once they're outside the top 5 or 6 guys, I don't really feel great about anybody. So that was the guy. The only other guy, Tags, that I would mention is Derek Carr. Now, I realize that, you can run a little bit more on the Chiefs, but 347-3 in that first game. The over-under is 56. There is going to be passing in that game. So he's a guy who is at 16th right now in expert consensus. I have him at 14th.
Same.
So, yeah, is that where you're at?
Yep.
A little bit more. I mean, again, it's not somebody who I'm going out of my way necessarily to start Derek Carr, but I do think that he's somebody who you certainly can if your quarterback's on a bye or just has like a bad matchup that you can get away, like Tannehill, for example, Tags. So you have him ahead of Tannehill, you said, right?
Who, Carr?
Derek Carr.
Yeah, I do.
You had him at,
yeah.
You said,
yep,
right,
14
yeah.
and 16.
Exactly, because I remembered what you said about where you had Tannehill. And how about you, Ryan? How do you feel about Carr this weekend?
Yeah, I'm trying to let go of my Raiders priors coming into the season. It's obviously a great matchup, but we think there's going to be some passing volume here. So, we saw him be very aggressive in that first matchup. Took, I believe, 7 shots down the field of 20-plus more yards. It's just not who Derek Carr has been over his career. But, it's just surprising. Kind of has the dogs to get it done now. We've seen Nelson Aguilar emerge. Henry Ruggs saw a nice uptick in volume, at least from a routes run standpoint last week. So, I think Carr's in a pretty good spot.
Can I share a fun fact with you guys?
Yes.
Henry Ruggs, the guy that they chose over Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, okay? He has now seen 25 targets this season. There have been 11 wide receivers who have seen more than 25 targets over the last 3 weeks, including Anthony Miller.
I know.
This is a joke, dude. It's such a joke. And by the way, the last time he played against them, Ruggs saw 3 targets. He turned them into 2 catches, 118 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah.
And then Nelson Aguilar had a crazy efficient game too. So like Carr, it's almost like I understand why I kind of like him this week, but at the same time, you have to look like he threw for 347 and 3 touchdowns their first meeting. But last year against a very similar defense in the same exact scheme, He threw for 198 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, and then the next game was 222 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. So it's like, I every single time I believe in Derek Carr, he lets me down. But he's actually played really well this year. It's just, I am so tired of the play calling, dude. I mean, it's ancient and it's terrible.
Yeah, okay. I like the Raiders rant. Way to go, especially since we are basically recommending Derek Carr this week and then talking about all the reasons why nobody should play Derek Carr. Let's go to tight end here, Ryan. Who do you like outside the top 12?
Do we have to go to tight end?
Yes, actually we do.
Because, just sit everybody. Sit everyone.
Hold on, this is a good segue. Somebody just gets, I put out a trade chart, which I write, and it has my rest of season rankings, and somebody very nicely, not in a very nice way on Twitter, was like, how do you have Jonnu Smith as your number 5 tight end rest of season, like blah 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 blah, all the reasons? And I just said, who are you putting ahead of him? And he was like, okay, you're right, I'm done. Not that you have to have Jonnu Smith at 5, but legitimately tight end this year, and we're talking about somebody outside the top 12. So good luck, Ryan. That's why you're going first. Yeah. It's just terrible. It is a terrible position more than ever. So Ryan, who do you have?
For instance, Jonnu Smith is the second highest priced tight end on the DraftKings main slate this week. He has 6 targets over his last 4 games. Right. It is just an abysmal position. It's really been Kelsey or bust this year from a season-long standpoint. But I guess Logan Thomas has seen 6 targets in back-to-back Alex Smith games. Nice matchup against Cincinnati. It's just such a crapshoot of a position. He's on the field, and he's going to see probably at least 4 targets, and that's more than I could say about a lot of other guys at the position.
Logan Thomas is almost always the correct answer on the show. If it's who do you like a little bit more than what Logan Thomas is my guy as well. Again, he's 14th in our expert consensus rankings. I have him 12th, I believe. So again, I'm not going crazy with it, but yeah, if you're looking for somebody outside the top 12, this is the guy that stuck out to me. How about you, Tags? Where are you?
I dig Logan Thomas. Tight ends are averaging 8.4 targets per game against the Bengals. That's the second most in the league. The 63% completion rate they're allowing is slightly below average, but everything else is above average, including the 12.2 yards per reception, touchdown every 12.7 targets, and 1.87 PPR points per target. I do think Thomas has a solid floor. Now, the one thing I do worry about a little bit is that Thomas did see 6 targets in that game last week, but Alex Smith threw the ball 50 times. That's just a 12% target share. But again, he's still a guy that hasn't seen fewer than 4 targets in any game this year. So if some of those J.D. McKissic targets start going to Logan Thomas, we're going to be like, oh, this is a breakout performance. Like he can do it against the Bengals because it's a really good matchup. So I definitely like this call. I have one guy that I wanted to mention over him, but I like it.
All right, before we get there, Ryan, would you rather start Logan Thomas against the Bengals or the aforementioned Jonnu Smith against Baltimore?
I have them right next to each other. I would probably say Logan Thomas, but gosh, it's such a gross position. Logan Thomas with conviction.
Yeah, yep. I agree with that. I have Thomas ranked ahead. How about you, Tex?
Same. I have Thomas 1 spot ahead, but it's not much, but it's still ahead.
Yeah. There we go. Let's go. And that, just to be clear, oh goodness, I just had this horrible thought. When I was talking, it was rest of season rankings where Jonnu Smith was number 5. Not this week. Jonnu Smith is number 14 for me this week. Stop yelling at me. Tags, somebody outside the top 12. Who do you have?
I'm going to go Jared Cook. We're talking about the tight end position and things that make us want to throw up. And, obviously starting Logan Thomas is one of those things. Jared Cook has seen fewer than 5 targets in 5 of his last 6 games, including a season low 2 targets last week that netted exactly, the same amount of yards that I had. But Jameis Winston coming under center. I've talked about the fact that they have a tough matchup against Atlanta in terms of what Atlanta does to stop the run. I don't anticipate Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray having much success on the ground. Kamara's still going to get it done through the air. That's fine. But Jameis is not someone that dumps the ball down nearly as much as Drew Brees does. So I'm looking for him to hit Cook down the seam a couple times against a Falcons team that's allowed ridiculous. Of the production they've allowed to skill position players, 21.6% of that has gone to tight ends, which is the 3rd highest mark in the league. And again, if we like Winston, we have to like some of his pass catchers. So Jared Cook is someone that's a stable presence over the middle of the field that I think he'll feel a little bit safer throwing to because he doesn't want to turn the ball over.
So let's just qualify it here. Where do you have Jared Cook ranked?
11th.
Yeah. Okay. So that's about it. Let me ask you guys both something. If Taysom, because this was a question we talked about yesterday, if Taysom Hill were tight end eligible in your league this week, Tags, where do you think you would have him ranked?
Oh, wow. I hadn't even thought about it, but I know he's like obviously in FanDuel. If you play there, he's available as a tight end, which is the dumbest thing ever. I would probably rank him as the tight end 8, maybe.
Okay. Oh, I like the specifics. Yeah, you could give me a range, but that's good enough for me. What about you, Ryan? You would rank, I mean, he's a top 10 tight end if he's eligible there, because I think he is in some format. I forget which one, but people were asking about it, that he is tight end eligible, at least in one of the major platforms.
Yeah, absolutely a top 10 tight end if he is tight end eligible in your league. And, Tags mentioned the FanDuel piece. Yeah, I mean, he's going to have some touches. Probably not going to, attempt more than 2 or 3 passes, if that's just kind of what we've seen historically with Breeze out. But again, high leverage around the goal line touches. And, that's more than we could say for most of these dudes that are going to be in starting lineups this week.
All right, let's go the opposite way now. Let's talk about our top sits. These are guys who, again, we're not saying that you have to sit, of course.
Dan is.
I'm not in any way. But if you want to yell at me, you can use me as your sounding board. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. Okay, for running backs within the top 20 in ECR, somebody who you're fading a little bit this week. Let's start with you, Ryan.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, Todd Gurley. I don't think we should expect too much from him. He's been very touchdown dependent on the season. We've outlined some of those things around the Saints' ability to stop the run. They lead the league in stuff rate, which is the rate of runs that gain 0 or negative yards, first in run D DVOA, first in defensive line adjusted line yards, and first in the schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. So he's just been giving up a little bit more work to Brian Hill, and if he doesn't find the red zone or in the end zone, he's not going to be someone you want in your lineup.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I believe that he is 15th in ECR. Wait, I didn't have PPR. Okay, I want to make sure, Tags, I'm not wrong. 15th in ECR. Where do you have him ranked, Ryan? Have you done your rankings yet this week?
I did a little bit before the show, just kind of a baseline one. Let me see here where I have.
You know what? Let me give you some names. I'll give you some names here instead. Would you rather start Todd Gurley against New Orleans or Zeke against Minnesota? Assuming his hamstring is okay, by the way, because I did see a quote earlier today. Again, it's Wednesday. It's the afternoon. We don't know much. That his hamstring is not maybe 100% that he was talking about it. But assuming he's a full go, Zeke against Minnesota or Gurley against the Saints?
Zeke pretty comfortably.
How about Gurley? Tags, you agree?
Yep.
Gurley or Duke Johnson? Duke Johnson is like the guy who gets asked in every question here. Gurley or Duke Johnson against the Pats?
I have Duke Johnson ahead of Gurley.
Tags.
Duke Johnson.
Gurley or Clyde Edwards-Helaire against Las Vegas?
Ooh, I have Edwards-Helaire 2 spots ahead of Gurley, but yeah, I think the Chiefs roll and we see some Edwards-Helaire this week.
How about you,
Helaire.
Yeah, all right. Well, we're all in agreement so far, so this is boring. Let's go to you, Tags. Who are you fading here within the top 20?
Who am I fading in the top 20? There's 2 running backs. I had 2 ready for this one. Do you want to give yours, Dan, so I don't steal it?
No, actually, unfortunately, mine was Gurley, so you can go ahead and give 2, so it sounds like we did a complete show.
Okay, well, Dan's was Kareem Hunt, so you know.
It was not.
Ronald Jones is the one that I would definitely mention here. I know he's coming off a big game, but as far as carries go, teams are averaging just 19 carries per game against the Rams. That's the 4th fewest in the league. That's really detrimental to Jones's role as the primary 1-2 down back, because not only is he's not the only one there, right? Over the last 4 weeks, Leonard Fournette has seen 45% of the carries, and then he's seen almost double the targets that Jones has. There's a reason that people last week were ranking Leonard Fournette like 10 spots higher than Ronald Jones. Let's not let one performance dictate what we do moving forward. We can't do that. I think that Jones might have more value this week. Maybe he's going to go out there as a starter. We know that. But again, this is not a great matchup on the ground. The Rams only allow basically just 4 flat yards per carry. And then through the air against running backs, they're a little bit looser. So I would think Leonard Fournette. I wouldn't be shocked if Leonard Fournette has a better game than Ronald Jones this week. So I have no idea why people are ranking him as a top 16. Oh, he's actually dropped since I seen it last.
Yeah, 19 now. Number
19 now, but I'm not a big fan of him. And I'm serious though about Kareem Hunt. I don't know why people like him this week against Philly very much. They're just not a team that has allowed no running back on the season has eclipsed 81 yards on the ground. The only running back who's totaled more than 100 yards on the ground against them since last year was Gus Edwards in a meaningless Week 17 game. Teams as a whole, there's just been one team of running backs who have totaled more than 103 rushing yards against the Eagles this year, and that was the Rams' backfield back in Week 2. I don't think there's going to be room for 2 top 20 performers. I'm not saying that you can't play Kareem Hunt as like an RB3 or a flex, but ranking him as RB13, you're basically saying that Philadelphia is going to allow two RB1 performances. It's not going to happen.
So are you starting Edwards-Helaire over Kareem Hunt?
I would, yes.
Would you start Damien Harris over Kareem Hunt?
Yes, I would. Not in a PPR format, but in a standard or half PPR, yeah.
How about Duke Johnson?
Duke Johnson.
Wow. Rye, do you agree? I'll get to Ronald Jones in a minute, but do you agree with that's a hard fade here on Kareem Hunt, who's 13th in expert consensus.
Yeah, those guys are all right in the mix for me. So I have Hunt at 16, which is just a little bit behind Harris, just a little bit ahead of Edwards-Helaire and Duke Johnson. Touchdown variance is something that's super hard to predict, though the Eagles are the only team in the league that have allowed more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns. So Tags' point's correct. I mean, they're pretty stout defensive line, adjusted yards, a lot of metrics like that. They pop. But we saw, pretty good usage again for Hunt, even though, last week with Chubb coming back. And obviously he has been basically the only one used in the passing game. Really haven't seen much in the passing game for Chubb. So I get why Tags is down on him, but I think he's still probably in that, just inside that top 20.
Yeah, Dan,
Go ahead, Ted.
Dan, so there have been 6 running backs all year who have finished better than RB29 against the Eagles. That's through 9 games. So it's only 66% of games they're allowing a running back to finish better than RB29. And that's why I'm saying I'm having such a difficult time. So if you want to say that the Hunt is a play and he's an RB2, you better lower the expectations for Nick Chubb then. Because I think Chubb is the better matchup here. I think he's the better 1-2 down back. I think he's the better running back in general.
So where do you have Chubb, out of curiosity, Tex? Because he's 7th in ECR.
I have Chubb at 11, and I have Kareem Hunt down at 21.
Wow, okay, yeah, so Chubb is 7th and Kareem Hunt is 13th. Now, I'm a little lower on them than consensus. I have Chubb 9th and Hunt 15th. I will say, though, that I have Hunt 15th, Edwards-Helaire 16th, Duke Johnson 17th, Damien Harris 18th, and those guys are if you flip that, I'd have no problem with that at all. So, but that's where it is. I'm not quite fading it as hard as you, but yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. I mean, it's certainly not the best matchup, and if you're it's really difficult to see both of those guys necessarily having a lot of success. Let's talk about Jones here for a second, Tags. I mean, I don't want to trust a running back, and I am fading Jones a bit. Would you rather start Ronald Jones or, in a half PPR league, McKissic?
I'll go Ronald Jones there. McKissic's going to start losing some of that role to Antonio Gibson. Gibson's a stud.
How about Kalen Ballage?
Ballage, for sure. I honestly want to hear the argument against Ballage or Ahmed over Kareem Hunt. I want to hear that argument.
Okay. Can I have some time to get my projections and formulate it before we do it right on the show? Because
I would love that. No, seriously, because I'm just struggling with it because I want to be level-headed about this and state my cause and because if I'm wrong on Kareem Hunt, I want to know. I want someone to point out a reason why I need to be higher on him in this matchup. I don't know if I see it because Kareem Hunt before last week, he hadn't totaled more than 85 yards on the ground in any game. He hadn't totaled more than 30 receiving yards. Again, Nick Chubb was probably being slowly eased in. That's probably why they split the carries that they did. I don't know. I mean,
this seems like an email debate that we can publish, Tags. What do you think? You want to go back to the AJ Brown style? Would you want to go back?
Well, who was right on AJ Brown, by the way?
Whatever. You're quiet down. But we are 48 minutes into this podcast, and I have to move it along. So let's go to wide receiver. Who are you fading here, Ryan, within the top 30?
I want to be Travis Fulgham. This is similar to what we were talking about earlier. He was kind of the belle of the ball earlier on the team. There was really no one else there. And now we're just seeing bodies come back a little bit. And I think we're just going to slowly start to see a little bit less of Fulgham with Rager popping. We saw Ertz is activated. I don't know if he's going to be active for the game per se. They still have a couple, weeks to make that decision. But Dallas Goedert's back. I just think we start to see a little bit less of that, top 15 receiver that Fulgham was for a few weeks.
Yeah, I love Travis Fulgham, but I can't disagree that he's basically, for this one outside the top, the wide receiver 3 range even. How about you, Tags? Is he outside your wide receiver 3 range?
Yeah, I'm at 39. I don't want to overreact to 1 week, and I just want to clarify that Alshon Jeffrey's return had nothing to do with his struggles last week. Fulgham was a full-time player. He was still in the same role. It's just Carson Wentz is not playing very good football.
Yeah. I'm very worried about the fact that it had nothing to do with Alshon Jeffrey because what if Jeffrey does carve out a bigger role, which is something that we were worried about? It could have just been it's his first game back, so he didn't see that many snaps. Yeah, Fulgham and Rager both saw the full complement of snaps. It was just Wentz has just been bad.
I didn't even mention Alshon because that's how off my mind he is.
Yep.
Yeah, no, but I'll certainly talk about it on the waiver wire show and have you break 15% of your fab budget for him like I recommended for like 3 straight weeks. Tags, go to you. Who's inside your top 30 who you are fading?
Mike Evans.
Yes.
Hate the matchup. I mean, the one thing I will say about him that he has a chance to succeed in is that he has, and some people may have missed this, he has played in the slot 52% of the time over the last 4 games. They're kind of rotating him in and out of there. They're trying to get him out of the matchups with perimeter cornerbacks because he doesn't gain separation, and Brady does not like throwing into tight coverage. He just doesn't. So they're trying to find ways to get the ball to Mike Evans, which if you go into the slot against the Rams, it's probably the best matchup, but none of them are great matchups.
It's still not good, though. They don't ever give up points to slot. I mean, any receivers, but slot receivers, it's not quite Ramsey shadowing him, which I mean, and Ramsey doesn't really.
He's not going to shadow. Darius Williams has been just as good on the other side. Like he's been so damn good.
Yeah.
So I'm worried about this entire pass catching core. I think Godwin has the most likely production of this group. But yeah, I'm worried about Evans for sure.
Yeah, Evans was my guy as well. How about you, Ryan? How do you feel about Evans this week?
Yeah, it's hard to be bullish on him. I mean, Williams has been awesome too. So, as a whole, just really hard to kind of differentiate. We're still only a couple weeks into, having AB in the mix here. And, Williams Evans has been very disappointing all season. So, yeah, he's right on the cusp. I think I have him at like 29. But yeah, I very much can see the case for him outside the top 30.
All right, Evans was my guy too, so let's get to quarterback. Who's somebody within the top 12, Ryan, who you are kind of looking to get away from this weekend?
Man, I don't think we can play Jared Goff. He just continues to disappoint, even in good matchups. I mean, last week it was touchdowns were the issue for him, but if you can't do it against Seattle, I mean, he had 302 yards, but no touchdown passes. And we know the story of Goff. The Goff narrative is a true one. If there is a chance to get pressure against him, he is really a different quarterback. And, the Buccaneers get that in spades. 3rd in pressure rate on the year, massive dip in accuracy and yards per attempt historically for Goff. And, Andrew Whitworth down, sidelines, protecting his backside. So I think it's a really bad spot for Goff this week.
Yeah, this is not a week that you want to go with Goff right here against the Bucs. Certainly not after last week. How about you, Tags? Who's your guy within the top 12 who you're fading?
Yeah, what's funny, dude, is that Goff, I saw the ECR and it was 18. I was like, why?
Yeah, I was even higher when I saw it earlier, so maybe someone bumped him up.
Yeah, it moves. Yeah. It will move. So if you prepare for this too early, sometimes it is going to move. But I agree. Even 18 for me is too high.
I'm at 24.
Yeah.
I hate him. I'm gonna go with the quarterback on the other side of the ball. I have zero clue why Tom Brady is considered a top 12 quarterback play this week. I have him at 17. Why? I mean, the Rams are allowing, in terms of like overall to their opponents, they're allowing just 1.21 fantasy points per snap to opponents. It's the lowest in the league. Like by comparison, the Falcons allow 1.72 fantasy points per snap. The Rams have allowed just 6.3 yards per attempt, 2.8% touchdown rate, both lowest marks in the NFL. And if you break it down and you say, hey, let's remove all rushing production that quarterbacks have had against them because Tom Brady's not mobile, the Rams have allowed 11.96 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks on a per actual pass attempt. So the efficiency when you're throwing the ball, it's the lowest in the NFL. And there's not a team that's close to them. They've generated a sack on, I think, 9.2% of the dropbacks. They've pressured quarterbacks. Brady, under pressure, he's completing just 46% of his passes, and he's thrown 3 touchdowns on 88 attempts. I think Brady's more of like a middling quarterback too. Sure, you could play him in a super flex league, but there are definitely 12 better options this week.
So you're starting Ryan Tannehill over him, right? Because I remember you have
one spot.
One spot, right?
Yep, one spot. That's it.
Man, and you're starting Jameis over him?
Oh, for sure.
Carson Wentz?
Yep.
Ooh, all right. How about you, Ryan? Are you fading Tom Brady as much as Stags is this week?
I was about to mention Carson Wentz since, my ECR has definitely shifted as a guy that's probably right in that range. Like, Wentz has been it's been rushing touchdowns or nothing. And he still hasn't had a top 12 week all season long. So I'd much rather have Brady over Wentz. I think Tags made some good cases as to why, and we just kind of all outlined how we're down on the pass catchers on the Bucs side. So yeah, he's probably a little bit ranked a little too high for sure. But Wentz is just, it's been, if you have to watch any of these Eagles games, it's been atrocious. Panicking. He looks like he's got happy feet. He's looking to run faster than ever before. So don't love the spot for him at all. He should be way lower, and I think Brady should too.
Sometimes I feel bad for Wentz because, his line is so terrible and he's getting blown up. But then half the time he'll do this miraculous thing where he'll have the ball and he'll get away, and then he'll just hold it for 4 or 5 seconds after you're like, no, just throw it away, just throw it away. And he'll still hold it, and then he'll get hit as he's throwing it and fumble the ball. And so part of it is on him. Okay, let's get to tight end. Who's somebody within your top 12 who you are not looking to play this week?
Oh, man. Back to the tight ends, guys.
You were hoping that I would skip tight ends, weren't you? You were like, oh, man, maybe this will go long, and Dan will forget that there's this whole other position that everybody in the fantasy community hates.
I can't believe that
no
the
way.
time is already...
No way. Make the tough
unbelievable,
choices.
And this is such a professional outfit.
There's a correct answer here. I hope you get it.
Go ahead. Tag says correct answer. Go ahead, Brian.
And I'm guilty of it. Was a huge fan in season-long stuff and high-stakes stuff, especially in, tight end premium. I really wanted Mike Gesicki to be a thing. It just isn't really happening. And even though they've traded guys and we have injuries, and he's losing touches and targets to other tight ends on his own team. Want nothing to do with Gesicki right now until we can start to see a real shift there.
Yeah, you definitely don't follow all the perfect rules. Tags doesn't either, by the way. He breaks them, and I also was way up because I was looking at standard. Yeah, Mike Gesicki, no. And Tags, have you, by the way, moved off the when you recommend Mike Gesicki, he does poorly, and when you don't, he does well because you just don't recommend him and he doesn't do
I just
well
stopped
anymore?
recommending him.
All right, that's very good. Yes, I agree against Denver. You just can't start him. How about you, Tags? What are you looking at?
The correct answer is Noah Fant. Up at number 5. No,
5 is crazy. By the way,
I don't
crazy.
Get it. We're entering week 11 of the season. There has been just one tight end against the Dolphins who has finished with more than 9 PPR points. That tight end was Hunter Henry last week, who finished, by the way, with just 4 catches for 30 yards. Oh, but he scored a touchdown. That legitimately saved him. There have been 4 tight ends, including George Kittle, who have seen 6+ targets against them, but no tight end has finished with more than 44 yards. Noah Fant does not belong in the top 5 this week.
No, crazy. Now, do you still have him in your top 12, though, Tags?
I have him right there at 12.
Yeah, it's just because tight end is terrible. So, when we talk about this, oh my God, this guy's terrible. He's terrible. He's amazing. But the matchup is terrible. We can't start him. But yeah, of course, I'm starting him at some point because you just have to. I agree with you, though. Fant at 5, that kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. All right, let's get to our top deep sleepers. Ryan, I will tell you in advance, there is no tight end. I'm not going to ask you a tight end right now. You can just go to running back and wide receiver. Let's get a running back who's outside the top 36. Is there anybody who stands out to you as somebody who might be a decent start this week?
Yeah, a little contingent on what we need to see from a health standpoint, but we need to understand what's going on with the Seattle backfield. Alex Collins kind of emerged and was the guy last week. We weren't really expecting that to happen. It had been a little bit of DJ Dallas and Travis Homer slowly eating into the passing game role, and then really Alex Collins was the guy early in that game when it was still up for grabs. And then it looks like Carlos Hyde is practicing. We still don't know the status of Chris Carson, but if
I just saw that he's questionable, by the way.
He's been questionable for like a month.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
They're day to day, aren't we all?
Yeah, to me, the way I look at it is all the Seattle running backs are basically ranked very low. Depending on who starts, that person has got to be the deep sleeper, right?
Yeah.
And it could be, what do you do if Carlos Hyde, Chris Carson, if he starts, of course you're in. What if Carlos Hyde and Alex Collins are active? Are you willing to start either one of them, Ryan?
If Carlos Hyde I would think Collins is probably only viable if both Hyde and Carson are out. That would probably be the only way that makes sense.
And so you would feel okay about starting Carlos Hyde then. And he, from what I'm looking at Twitter right now, he is actually not even listed on the injury report. So Hyde is not even on the injury report.
Yeah.
So Tags.
I am
celebrate.
I'm done with Carlos Hyde. I'm mad at him. So every freaking time we've talked about him on the waiver wire show, he doesn't play the next game. So maybe we should have talked about him yesterday just so Alex Collins can get a shot to run with this job.
Yeah, that is true. We did highly recommend Carlos Hyde, I think, is our number 1 waiver wire pickup in 2 different weeks. and he did not play that following week, despite not actually suffering an injury during the game. It was very frustrating, but I get it. Yeah, Carlos Hyde, who's out there, certainly now becomes a guy who fantasy managers can start. How about you, Tags? Anybody else outside the top 36?
I'm so mad about this.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm so mad. I wanted Alex Collins to play this week.
So did I.
So I will go with I have Tony Pollard and Malcolm Brown down. Brown is the primary pass catcher in that offense. He's run more than double the routes of any other running back in that offense. And Tampa Bay allows 3 yards per carry on the ground, like 3 flat. Like they're a team you do not run the ball on. So I expect them to go through the air. Jared Goff's going to be under constant pressure. So I expect him to build something into that game to give him like an outlet. And Malcolm Brown's that guy. And then Tony Pollard is a guy who has totaled at least 8 touches in each of the last 5 games, and he's explosive. I mean, when he gets the ball in the open field, like he can make it happen. It's almost like there's really not much difference between Tony Pollard and J.K. Dobbins right now.
Yeah. And again, as I mentioned, I mean, unless I saw it quickly right before we went on, it sounded like Zeke in his statements was just basically like, my hamstring's not at 100%. Now, he got a ton of work in a game that he wasn't expected to before the bye, but still, that would make Pollard more attractive. Brown was my guy as well, Tags, because again, I think they're going to need to do something, and I think he is the one who's likely to factor in to the passing down work more. All right, let's get to a wide receiver here outside the top 50. So dig deep, Ryan. Who do you have?
This is another one that's contingent on an injury situation, but if we do not have Calvin Ridley, it looks like Olamide Zaccheaus looks to be a pretty viable start here. We outlined how we expect the running game to really struggle, stub their toe against this stout front for the Saints. Russell Gage, his role pretty much was the same last time they were out. He did his work in the slot, but other than Julio, Zaccheaus ran the most routes and handled 4 of 6 targets for 103 and a score. So in a spot where we're expecting the Falcons to have to rely on the passing game, he is probably a pretty viable start this week if Ridley's out.
How about you, Tex? Who's your guy outside the top 50?
I have done the last couple of weeks. I did Kendrick Bourne, and then I did Josh Reynolds, and this week I'm going to do Larry Fitzgerald. You know what they all have in common? They played the Seahawks. You start wide receivers against the Seahawks, period. The last time that these two teams played, Kyler Murray, I would say it was, I don't want to say a disappointing day through the air, but he could have even had more. In Seattle, in that game, Larry Fitzgerald caught all 8 of his targets for 62 yards. I just feel like if you're looking for a player outside the top 50, you're going to have to find a guy that's going to get targeted. You're searching for a high-scoring game, a guy that's pretty reliable. He's not the sexiest play, but if you want wide receiver 4 production or something like that, I think Fitzgerald can do it.
Okay, gross, but I understand the logic. My guy is Keelan Cole, and again, I'm assuming that Laviska Shenault is going to be out here. Steelers give up a ton of points to wide receivers. Tags, you mentioned it. I'm not expecting a good game from Jake Luton as he tries to avoid the pass rush, but I do think that there will be a negative game script. They'll have to do a lot of throwing. If it's really just DJ Chark and Keelan Cole in that offense, I'm willing to roll with him if I absolutely have to in a deeper league. But again, nobody too exciting here outside the top 50. But you mentioned Larry Fitzgerald. So let's just get right into that game here as we finish up. Let's start with the Cardinals. You are obviously starting Kyler Murray. You're obviously starting DeAndre Hopkins. How about the running backs here? I mean, the Seattle run defense has been good. They do allow rushing touchdowns. But Ryan, how do you feel about Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds?
Yeah, it's hard to really like one guy more than the other. I mean, Drake was back, played 52% of the snaps. Chase Edmonds obviously still involved with 49. Kind of what we saw early in the season with them. Drake didn't really do much with his really one opportunity early in the season to kind of run away with it, and I don't think he really would have been able to do that anyway. So, 11 touches, 77 yards for him is nice. He's going to continue to do that. He'll be, pretty efficient on limited touches, but they both kind of cannibalize each other and their ceilings.
So let's talk about the guy who's the star of the show. Would you rather start Drake or Kalen Ballage?
Kalen Ballage.
Would you rather start Drake or in half PPR? Let's go back to JD McKissic.
I would go with Drake. Again, we're looking at like 58, point total here. Just the game environment is so much better, and I feel like the bottom could drop out for McKissic really at any time.
How about you, Tags? How do you feel about the running backs?
Kenyon Drake is a fine low-end RB2 for me. I would put him right in the same range as those guys like Kalen Ballage. It's not a great matchup. Teams have only run the ball 35% of the time against the Seahawks, and rightfully so. But this game does have a total of 57.5 points. Kenyon Drake does get the goal line work for this team, so I'd say he has a better than average shot at getting a touchdown. again, last week it was more of a timeshare, I think, because he was coming off that injury. So, again, he's going to get most of the work on first and second down. But if the Seahawks were to pull ahead, he can get game scripted out, and then we're going to see a whole lot of Chase Edmonds, because there has not been a game this year where Kenyon Drake has seen more than 2 targets, which is terrible. I don't know what happened there, because he used to be a guy that was considered a third down back. I don't know. It's weird that they haven't involved him there, but I have been low end RB2 territory.
All right, Tags, you said that, your deep sleeper was Larry Fitzgerald, so you've got to like Christian Kirk in this matchup, right?
For sure. He's, I have him, I think, is a borderline top 24 play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's around where I am. How about you, Ryan? Are you confident in Christian Kirk on Thursday?
You fire up all the viable pass-catching options against the Seahawks. Yeah, no doubt Christian Kirk's the start.
It's pretty much a start everybody type of game. For the Seahawks, you're obviously starting Russell Wilson. DK Metcalf just 2 for 23 against Arizona in the first game, but you're, of course, starting him in this one, correct? Mm-hmm. Like, you always start DK Metcalf. Sorry for even asking. Tyler Lockett is on the injury report. We know he missed practice this week. But if he starts, you guys are still starting him, right, Ryan? I mean, if Lockett's out there, you're putting him in your lineup?
I mean, he only saw 20 targets last time they matched up, so it's a little light. But
but maybe he only had a finite amount of targets that he could see against Arizona, and he saw them all in one game. Have you ever thought of that?
No, that's a heck of a point. I mean,
thank you.
Did not bake that in, but I'll go back to the drawing board on it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have Lockett right now ranked 9th. Assuming he plays. Is that where you guys have him? Do you have him as a top 10 play here? How about you, Tag?
I have him 10th, so yeah.
And Rye, is that basically where you're at? Like, no doubt?
Yeah, he's a top 10 play.
All right, so we briefly mentioned the running backs, but let's just walk through it. We have Hyde, who is not on the injury report. Let's assume Chris Carson does not play. Where are you putting Hyde, generally speaking, in your rankings? And do you think Collins is going to factor in? I'll go to you first, Tags.
I don't really know how to feel about this just yet. I mean, like, literally, it's just taking me back, because I didn't want to imagine a scenario where Carlos Hyde played, but he apparently is if he was removed from the injury report. So they signed Carlos Hyde when they could have signed Alex Collins, who was sitting out there as a free agent. So, I mean, I don't know. It sucks, because Pete Carroll is the type of guy that will play the better men, and I think the better running back at this stage of their career is Alex Collins, but I don't think I could play either of them as anything more than like an RB3, just because of the risk associated with them. DJ Dallas is going to mix in on some passing downs. It's brutal, because the matchup has gotten better against Arizona too. Corey Peters out for the year, so like their best interior lineman. So the matchup is good, and that's why I'm so mad about it, because I had Collins ranked as my number 17 running back. This week, but I got to rethink all this stuff.
So I assume, though, if we find out right before the game that Chris Carson is going to play, that you're just firing up Chris Carson?
Yeah.
Okay. How about you, Ryan? How do you feel? Let's assume Carson is out here. Are you willing to roll with Carlos Hyde in your lineup?
Unfortunately, I think we have to. I mean, this is he handled 18 touches for 76 yards and a score in week 7 when he got hurt with the hamstring injury. So, I mean, who gets the passing game work? We don't know. I mean, Alex Collins actually ran the most passing routes last week. It's not someone that we typically profile in that sense, with guys like Homer and Dallas on the lineup there too. But yeah, I mean, if Hyde's active, to Tags' point, I mean, of any team, we do think of Pete Carroll to be the guy that will give the best man the job. But, he did go with Hyde over Collins when he had the chance. So I think we kind of have to start Hyde in this spot.
Gross.
Yeah.
That's basically where we are. All right. Wonderful. All right, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Just remind everybody where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, I'm over at 4 for 4. I have Move the Line podcast every week, talking basically about all the games, mostly focusing on the betting markets. And then the rest of my work is over at FTN, FTN Network, FTN Daily, and FTN Bets. You can find me over there doing lots of stuff as the season goes along.
All right, tomorrow will be our DFS show, of course, where you will have the very happy version of Tags, the best version of Tags that there is, which is the post-primer version and one of his last bye-week ones. So it's going to be great. We'll talk to you then.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Make sure to check out our featured videos as well. Also, make sure to click that red subscribe button to get notified when we post videos in the future.